You know what nobody talks about? How boring marriage can get when your husband thinks he's figured you out completely. I'm Reagan, I'm 26, and until recently I thought I had my life pretty well sorted. William's 28, works one of those corporate jobs that sounds important but is probably just pushing papers around. And we've been together for 6 years total, married for the last 4. Here's what gets me about William. He always acted like he was doing me some huge favor by being patient with my emotions. Like, excuse me for being human? If I had a rough day at my retail job or dealt with some nasty customer, yeah, I might need to vent about it. That's what normal people do. But William would get this look, this patient little smile, like he was dealing with a child having a tantrum. Never said it directly, but I could tell he thought I was weak or dramatic or whatever. We moved to this new town about 2 years back because of his job. Better pay, better this, better that. I didn't want to leave my mom. Going from a 20-minute drive to an hour and a half felt like moving to another state. But what choice did I have? Good wives support their husbands' careers, right? That's what everyone always says. The thing is, William got so caught up in his new position that he barely noticed how hard the transition was for me. I found another retail job, made it work, but those first few months were rough. He'd work from home most days, but had to go into the office 3 times a week, which meant long stretches where I was basically on my own in this unfamiliar place. That's when I started spending more time on Twitter. It became my escape during those quiet hours when William was buried in work calls or spreadsheets or whatever it is he does all day. I could be funny, engaging, just myself, without someone analyzing every word that came out of my mouth. That's where I met Lex. He was charming in ways William had forgotten how to be. William was all responsibility and schedules and practical conversations about bills and groceries. Lex actually made me laugh. He got my sense of humor, appreciated my personality in ways my own husband seemed to have stopped doing years ago. Look, I know what you're thinking, but it started innocent enough. Just comments on posts, then direct messages about random stuff. Lex paid attention to things William never noticed. If I posted about having a bad day, Lex would check in and ask how I was doing. When was the last time William did that without me having to spell out exactly what was wrong? The conversations got deeper over time, more personal. Lex wanted to know about my dreams, my frustrations, what made me happy. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. It felt like finally having someone who was genuinely interested in who I was as a person, not just as William's wife who sometimes got emotional about things. I started looking forward to those conversations more than anything else in my day. When William would come home from the office, I'd have to hide my phone and pretend I'd been doing housework or watching TV. But really, I'd been having the most engaging conversations of my life with someone who actually seemed to care about my thoughts and feelings. William, meanwhile, was completely oblivious. He'd ask about my day in that distracted way people do when they're not really listening for the answer. I'd give him some generic response while thinking about the incredible conversation I'd just had with Lex about art or music or philosophy, topics William never wanted to discuss because they weren't practical. The first time Lex suggested meeting in person, my heart started racing. Not from guilt, I wasn't doing anything wrong yet, but from excitement. When was the last time I'd felt genuinely excited about anything in my marriage? I couldn't even remember. We met at this little coffee shop downtown while William was at work. The chemistry was immediate and electric. Everything about Lex was different from William. Spontaneous, passionate, actually present in the conversation instead of half listening while thinking about work stuff. We talked for 3 hours straight. 3 hours where I felt like the most interesting person in the world. Lex hung on every word, laughed at my jokes, asked follow-up questions about things I mentioned. It was intoxicating having someone's full attention like that. When he walked me to my car, there was this moment where we almost kissed. Almost. I pulled back at the last second, but not because I felt guilty. I pulled back because I wasn't ready yet, but I knew I would be soon. The thing is, William had become so predictable, so routine. Our conversations were about practical stuff. What to make for dinner, whether we needed to call the landlord about the leaky faucet, what show to put on while we ate dinner in silence. When was the last time he'd asked me about my dreams? When was the last time he'd made me feel desired instead of just needed? I started being more careful about my phone, more private about my social media. Not because I was doing anything wrong. I wasn't. Not yet. But because I knew William wouldn't understand. He'd make it into some big dramatic thing, probably accuse me of emotional cheating, when all I was doing was having a friendship with someone who actually appreciated me. The second time Lex and I met, things went further. We were sitting in his car after another coffee date, left just talking, and when he leaned in to kiss me, I didn't pull away. It felt like waking up after being asleep for years. Everything with William had become so mechanical, so routine. This was passion, real passion. I justified it easily enough. William barely touched me anymore unless he wanted sex, and even then it felt like going through the motions. He never looked at me the way Lex did, like I was something precious and exciting. If William had been a better husband, if he had paid attention to me, if he had made me feel wanted and appreciated, none of this would have happened. The physical relationship with Lex developed quickly after that first kiss. We'd meet whenever William was at the office, and it was everything my marriage wasn't. Spontaneous, passionate, intense. Lex made me feel beautiful, desired, alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. He'd tell me things William never said, notice things about me William never saw. The way I laughed, the way I moved, little details about my personality that my own husband had stopped appreciating years ago. With Lex, I felt like I was rediscovering myself. I became an expert at covering my tracks. I'd shower before William got home, make sure there was no evidence of where I'd been or what I'd been doing. I even started being extra affectionate with William sometimes, just to throw him off the scent if he was getting suspicious. The lies came surprisingly easily. I'd tell William I was working late when I was with Lex. I'd say I was going shopping when I was at Lex's apartment. I'd claim I had a headache when I just didn't want William touching me after I'd been with someone else. The guilt was minimal, if I'm being completely real with you. How could I feel guilty about finally being happy? About finally feeling appreciated and desired? William had his chance to be the husband I needed, and he chose to be boring and predictable instead. This was just me taking care of my own needs since he couldn't be bothered to. As my relationship with Lex intensified, I got better at living this double life. The thrill of it all was addictive. The secrecy, the passion, the way Lex made me feel like I was the center of his universe. I'd meet him during lunch breaks, or we'd find quiet spots around town when William was working late. William remained completely clueless. He'd come home, ask about my day in that automatic way, and I'd give him some boring answer while thinking about the incredible afternoon I'd just spent with Lex. It was almost funny how oblivious he was. I started taking bigger risks. Lex and I would text constantly. Even when William was home, I'd excuse myself to the bathroom or say I was checking work messages. Our conversations got more explicit, more detailed about what we wanted to do to each other. It was like having this whole secret world that was just mine. Sometimes I'd catch William looking at me strangely, like he was trying to figure something out, but he never asked direct questions. Maybe he suspected something, but he was too much of a coward to confront me about it. That was so typical of him, always avoiding conflict, always taking the easy route. The physical evidence was harder to hide. I had to be careful about everything, making sure there were no marks, no unfamiliar scents, no forgotten items. One time I almost left one of the condom wrappers in my purse, but caught it just in time. The close calls actually made it more exciting. Lex started pushing for more. He wanted me to leave William, wanted us to be together openly. Part of me was tempted, but I wasn't stupid. William provided stability, financial security, a comfortable life. Why would I give all that up for uncertainty? I could have both, the security of my marriage and the passion of my affair. It seemed perfect. I became a master at managing both relationships, though I didn't think of it as manipulation then. When William seemed suspicious, I'd pick a fight about something else to distract him. When he tried to be affectionate, I'd either reject him or go along with it while thinking about Lex. I controlled every interaction, Every conversation. The lies built on each other, creating this elaborate fiction that somehow felt more real than my actual marriage. I'd tell William I was working overtime when I was at Lex's place. I'd claim I was tired when I just didn't want William's hands on me after being with someone else. Each deception came easier than the last. Looking back, part of me might have wanted to get caught. The thrill was starting to wear off, and I was getting tired of managing two relationships. But I was too proud to confess, too comfortable to leave, and too selfish to stop. So I kept going, thinking I was smarter than everyone else. Then, everything changed on what started as a completely normal day. William had been acting strange for a few weeks, quieter than usual, more distant. I figured he was stressed about work or something. Men always get dramatic about their jobs. I was actually relieved because it meant less attention on me. I'd been getting careless, I'll admit that now. The condom wrapper I thought I'd thrown away properly, that little piece of packaging I must have dropped. I was so focused on the big picture that I missed the small details. But William was usually so oblivious that I didn't think it mattered. That afternoon, I was on the couch watching my show, just relaxing after another amazing morning with Lex. We'd spent hours at his place, and I was still buzzing from it. William came home earlier than usual, but I didn't think much of it. He walked over with this envelope in his hand, and I could tell something was different about his energy. When he handed me that envelope, I was genuinely confused. It looked official, formal. My first thought was maybe something work-related, or we were getting audited. I opened it casually, not prepared for what I was about to see. Divorce papers. Actual divorce papers with my name on them, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting division of assets. My hand started shaking immediately, not from guilt, but from pure shock. How dare he? How dare he blindside me like this without even trying to work things out? He started talking then, listing everything he knew. The condom wrapper, my Twitter conversations, my messages with Lex. He'd been spying on me, going through my private things, violating my privacy. The betrayal I felt was overwhelming. This man I'd trusted, this man I'd built a life with, had been sneaking around behind my back like some kind of detective. I tried to explain, tried to make him understand that this wasn't what it looked like, that Lex didn't mean anything, that we could work through this. But he just stood there with this cold, determined expression, like he'd already made up his mind about everything without giving me a chance to defend myself. The worst part was how calm he was about it all, like he'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. While I'd been living my life, thinking everything was fine, he'd been building a case against me. It felt like the ultimate betrayal. I was his wife, and instead of talking to me, instead of fighting for our marriage, he'd gone straight to a lawyer. When he told me to pack my things and leave, something inside me just snapped. This was my home too. These were my things, my life, my marriage. He didn't get to just decide it was over and kick me out like I was some stranger. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I went to the kitchen and my hands moved without conscious thought. The knife was right there in the block, and suddenly, it was in my grip. I wasn't thinking about consequences or what would happen next. I was just thinking about how unfair this all was. How he was destroying my life over what? Some harmless connection with someone who actually appreciated me? When I walked back into the living room, he was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen like he was the victim in all this. Like he hadn't just destroyed our marriage with his paranoia and his inability to forgive. The sight of him sitting there so calmly while my world crumbled made the rage even worse. I don't remember making the conscious decision to use the knife. One second, I was standing behind the couch, and the next, I was bringing it down toward his neck. He must have seen something in the TV's reflection because he turned at the last second, and instead of getting him where I intended, I got his shoulder. He jumped up, yelling, and I pulled the knife out and tried again. This time I got him in the back, but he was moving, trying to get away from me. The third time, I managed to get him in the stomach before he fell behind the couch. The whole thing probably lasted less than a minute, but it felt like hours. When I saw him on the floor, bleeding, reaching for the phone, reality started creeping back in. But not guilt. Never guilt. Just the realization that I'd probably made things worse for myself. I ran. Didn't stick around to see if he was okay or to call for help. Just grabbed my purse and got in my car and drove straight to my mom's house. The entire drive, I was thinking about how to explain this, how to make people understand that I wasn't the bad guy here. William had pushed me to this point with his accusations and his divorce papers and his complete lack of understanding. At my mom's house, I broke down and told her everything. Well, my version of everything. How William had been distant and cold, how he'd been spying on me, how he'd ambushed me with divorce papers without even trying to work things out. I may have downplayed the Lex situation, made it sound more innocent than it was. My mom was sympathetic at first, until the police showed up a few hours later. That's when I realized how serious this had become. They weren't there to mediate a domestic dispute. They were there to arrest me for attempted murder. The legal process was a complete nightmare. They charged me with attempted murder, aggravated assault, and assault with a deadly weapon. My lawyer, Daniel, kept trying to get me to show remorse, to take responsibility, to make myself look sympathetic to the jury. But why should I? William was the one who started all this with his spying and his divorce papers. The trial was humiliating. They made me sit there while William testified about finding evidence of my affair, about how betrayed he felt, about how I'd tried to kill him. They painted me as this cold, calculating woman who'd cheated on her husband and then tried to murder him when he found out. That wasn't the real story at all. The real story was about a woman who was neglected by her husband, who found comfort elsewhere, and who was pushed to her breaking point by a man who chose lawyers over communication. But nobody wanted to hear that version. They just wanted their villain, and I was convenient. Daniel kept pushing me to take a plea deal, to show remorse, to apologize. But I wasn't sorry for defending myself against William's emotional neglect. I wasn't sorry for finding happiness with Lex when my own husband couldn't be bothered to make me happy. The only thing I was sorry about was getting caught. The jury found me guilty on all charges. 10 years in prison. 10 years of my life gone because William couldn't handle the fact that his wife needed more than he was capable of giving. The judge talked about the severity of my actions, about how I'd betrayed the trust of marriage and resorted to violence instead of communication. But what about William's betrayals? What about his emotional neglect, his spying, his complete failure as a husband? Nobody wanted to talk about that part. 2 years into my sentence, I heard through my mom that William had recovered completely from his injuries. No permanent damage, no lasting effects. He'd moved on with his life, gotten himself a new girlfriend, some quiet librarian type who probably never challenged him or made him work for anything. The worst part? He was apparently thriving. Got some big opportunity at work, moved to a nicer place, seemed genuinely happy in ways he never was with me. It made me sick thinking about how he'd probably tell people I was crazy, unstable, dangerous, when really, I was just a woman who wanted to be loved and appreciated. Meanwhile, I'm stuck here for 8 more years, paying the price for his inability to be the husband I needed. But you know what? I'm not broken by this. I'm not going to come out of here apologizing for wanting more from my marriage. If William had been a better husband, if he'd paid attention to me, if he'd made me feel valued, none of this would have happened. Some people might say I got what I deserved. But the way I see it, I'm the real victim here. I'm the one who suffered in a loveless marriage. I'm the one who found happiness elsewhere because my own husband couldn't provide it. And now I'm the one paying the ultimate price, while he gets to play the hero in his new perfect life. But I'll survive this, and when I get out, I'll find someone who actually knows how to appreciate what they have. Someone who won't take me for granted the way William did. Someone who understands that love requires effort, attention, and genuine care, things William never learned how to give. That's the real tragedy here. Not what happened that day with the knife, but what led up to it. A marriage that died from neglect long before I ever met Lex. A husband who was too comfortable, too complacent, too sure of himself to notice his wife slipping away. And a woman who just wanted to feel alive again, who just wanted to matter to someone. I may be the one behind bars, but William's the one who has to live with the knowledge that his failures as a husband created this whole situation. That's a prison of its own, even if he's too proud to admit it.